Thank you, sir. And I'd like to speak early because it gives some time to perhaps look back at the comments paper. First, I must apologise to members for the length of the original comments paper. I felt it necessary, as the decision to be made today may have serious long-term consequences for our primary schools. And I hope members have had time to read and digest the contents of that comments paper and the one that accompanies this amendment. Both are relevant to this debate. I also may speak for a reasonable amount of time on these issues around the proposition because they need to be fully explained and understood. And I'd like to say thank you to those in the background. This was lodged at the beginning of the summer break when it was difficult to access schools, with the original dates to be the first day back after those summer break. So officers provided me with the information that I asked for during the summer break quickly, and thank you to those schools and head teachers who completed the survey very quickly and with a great deal of thought. So where to begin? I must first address the issue of cost. In the original proposition report, the Deputy states, and it's relevant because I'll build on that, it was stated, it is not anticipated there will be any significant extra financial resources required to implement this proposition. I did not agree with this statement. The original comments paper on page 5 and 12, the costs for the start of ongoing development of this provision across 3 schools. The amendment states 2 or more schools, at least 2 schools. These costs have not been addressed in the amendment. The report with the amendment states, it is possible that there are resources within the Education Department which would enable the appointment of a project manager, but if not, it is estimated a 12-month appointment will cost in the region of £60,000. So making this decision on it being possible that there are resources with this minimal estimate exemplifies the lack of reality and the cost of implications of this proposition. And even as amended, the proposer states, undertaking the headship of a new bilingual school is undoubtedly a responsibility which is deserving of an additional allowance, but none of that cost has been put into the amended proposition. This also separates some heads from pay scales, which changes dramatically the way that we employ head teachers. But the proposition gives no sources for this money and no costs for this change. The estimate given in my original report to the proposition are provisional but realistic to address the additional delivery of the ongoing curriculum in primary schools. And I emphasise that word purposefully. Because this is the first time I'll make clear that this position is not about simply using French as a language in primary schools, but the complete delivery of Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum in French. The specialist use of language is more complex, which requires staff who are trained to specific levels, or fluent speakers who are qualified to deliver the curriculum, trained as teachers. Bilingual education is a term that refers to, and I quote, the teaching of academic content in 2 languages, in a native and second language. It is more than simply speaking in another language, but teaching concepts and content in that second language. And what about those students whose native language is not English? Are they to be excluded or segregated because they have to learn their English in order to access that curriculum as well? We must recognise that the primary curriculum across all subjects is highly organised, detailed and sequenced from nursery to year 6. They are sequenced to be taught in English and will have to be sequenced to be taught in French as an additional language. There are costs of planning and resourcing the materials for the parallel curriculum in a matching sequential way in a different language. Teaching may take longer and have an impact across the year, as will any assessments undertaken during later years. The proposer at no point addresses assessment. You cannot teach everything twice unless you have half the content. And this curriculum up to year 6 prepares our children for year 7 and later formal qualification. Gaps cannot simply be caught up later. And what of secondary schools? When the project ends, what happens to teaching? There will be costs of employing and training additional teaching assistants. And teaching assistants are not mentioned, and they are an absolutely vital role. Some teaching assistants are one-to-one. I'll come back to that. They play an integral role of delivery of the primary curriculum. The total eventual recurring costs of up to £2.1 million are currently not funded and will need to come from other provisions at a time of intense pressure on schools. The report for the amendment states, the head teacher surveys show that there are already 8 primary school teachers employed in the department who could teach Jersey curriculum in French. Not all may wish to do so, but at the start towards the complement of 14 required over the conversion period of 7 years. And that is for 2 schools, a minimum of 2 schools. This is an enormously simplistic view of how primary schools work and what teachers do. Could is an important word. Will staff be asked to move schools, move year groups and teach and break relationships with colleagues? Contractually, I am unsure how this works and whether we will simply have staff leave, particularly given the strong response from primary schools that do not support this type of school structure. And the assumption that this can be simply dealt with by a churn of staff leaving is simply incorrect. The cohort of trainee teachers will not necessarily fit this very different need. And let me address the priorities in our schools. I must share my concern that this project does not align with the clear priorities set to address the ambition of providing a high-performing education system for all islanders. Put simply, establishing bilingual schools as a priority will divert from ongoing work and create another level of selection. And it must be understood that French is the only subject currently to have support in schools outside of English, Maths and GRE. French is taught as a curriculum subject. Years 3 to 6 in all schools has French taught, the only subject apart from English, Maths and GRE that is formally on the curriculum. All schools have access to the French experience in Year 5, a very successful process that was linked to in the original comments paper. In fact, if you look online, you can look at a wonderful video of the young people engaging in it. Reality, what's actually happening in our schools. They have 3 hours per week, 6 weeks of intensive French teaching. And page 8, it's on page 8 of the original comments paper. Jersey has a growing number of multilingual learners. Our current policy of embedding a proficient use of English while supporting the developing of a home language is the right approach. It addresses a child's access to our education system and society, while supporting access to their home language and culture. It also addresses concerns over enabling families to return to their home countries with children who can access their home language. And this is an important feature of avoiding issues around modern-day slavery. It also enables these children to re-enter the education system of their home country. So in our current 2024 primary schools, first languages are declared as 68.7% English, 14.7% Portuguese, 6.2% Polish, and 1.1% French. According to the 2021 census, the latest census, 0.7% of the population considered their ethnicity to be white French. This has fallen slightly from 0.9 in 2011. Other ethnicity groups who speak French may be present on Ireland, but the numbers were too small to report. And so there are 29 French-speaking countries in Africa, but none are listed in the 84 countries where Jersey residents have declared their births. And that's Statistics Jersey data from the 2021 census. So we have to look at capacity. We must look at our capacity to deliver the changes suggested. It will require a 7-year approach to deliver 2 or more fully bilingual schools. And the words or more, or at least, are very important. The amendment puts no limit on the number of schools, and so the impact could be greater. Considering the lack of appropriately experienced colleagues on Ireland, French-speaking teachers will need to be employed, most likely from off Ireland, at least in the short term, producing either redundancies for the current Jersey teachers or doubling staff in schools, both of which incur significant costs. So it is up to members if they accept the proposer's dismissal of the cost as a small number of additional staff and the assumption that it will be considerably lower cost. But I do not accept this, and without a clear understanding of this, we could be deciding today to go down a path that will have huge implications long into the future for the structure and costs of our primary education, at a time when the need is growing and resource is shrinking. And at no point, sir, does the proposer address teaching assistants and how they will be recruited to work in bilingual schools, or indeed these additional costs. So the reality of modern schools is some young people have one-to-one help. That's the only way they can access school. Now, that we're either going to say that they are not going to be included in this and therefore excluded again from something else, or we are going to employ teaching assistants who are multilingual in order to support those children. It may not like this, sir, but it's a reality. And reality is so important in schools. The reality of the experience of schools and education is what children see every day. So teachers recruited from France are unlikely to have training or experience in our statutory early years foundation curriculum. Although children in France can attend daycare, maternelle, or kindergarten pre-maternelle as early as age 3, these provisions are not mandatory. Children in France do not have to be enrolled until school age until 6. Consequently, there is a significant difference in the experience and expertise of primary schools in their two jurisdictions. The brevet qualification is a diploma of competence roughly equivalent to GCSE pass in French. The brevet is not a qualification that demonstrates the linguistic fluency that would be required to teach the full Jersey curriculum subjects in French across years of reception to year 6. The vocabulary and grammar required to teach, for example, science or geography is far more complex than that taught if you are teaching pupils at in the early acquisition of French. And those with A-level French may also struggle to have strong enough language in French to teach a child subjects such as mathematics or science, given the specialist terminology and concepts required, particularly if children were finding it tricky and need their learning explained in a variety of ways. And I urge members, go and sit with teachers, see their interaction day to day, and the magical, and I use that word unreservedly, it's not in my speech, it just came to me, the magical way in which they engage with young people to get concepts across in creative and incredible ways. That would have to happen in dual language as well, and that would be extremely difficult. So therefore, bilingual French-English teachers will need to be fluent in both languages. As such, there is either a need to retrain and requalify locally English-speaking teachers to learn, or to recruit teachers from abroad, and we've been through the cost of that. So the other area, and I apologise for going on, but it's very important that we cover everything here, is catchment. We must also consider the effect of specialist bilingual schools on catchment areas. Currently, pupils outside the fee-paying government of Jersey non-provided schools are offered a primary school place that is close to where they live, i.e. their catchment area. If we include a new criteria of parental choice to opt for or against bilingual schools, this will have impacts. Up to 78 children or families at each school per year will be told they cannot offer the place in their catchment school unless the family lived the catchment of a bilingual school stream, applied to attend and were accepted. We cannot determine where that impact would be at this stage. A new policy and criteria for admissions applications and appeals would need to be created. See page 6 of the original comments paper if you want to see more detail on that. So the reference to Stats Jersey was important, and that subtle change right at the beginning of the proposition. But I will say, sir, that the reason Stats Jersey is used in detail is so we get meaningful data. Now, it's interesting that the questions that we sent to head teachers, which were very specific for a very specific reason, because they were about their schools. Would you want your school to convert to a bilingual school? Not this notion that would you like your children, it's like asking the question, would you like your children to be top of everybody's class at the end of your time at school? Of course they would. That is not a valid question. And the argument around validity is where you have to interact with Stats Jersey, because they're good at it, sir. Valid questions and valid outcomes is what we should be using to make decisions like this. And without that input from Stats Jersey, it will not be as valid. Given that the original survey has already been questioned, we are going to go down that pathway again if we're not careful. I also know, sir, that a statutory consultation would be required. The creation of 2 or more bilingual schools will require statutory public consultation in accordance with the Education Law 1999. This consultation will need to be open for at least 2 months, following which the Minister, myself, is required to present a report to the Assembly within 3 months. That's the rules. This consultation will come at a cost, and the use of time of officers will take them away from current priorities. So I'm very aware we have a short term left. And if you're wanting to try and get something done in education right now, I need to have priorities. And I've been very honest in scrutiny about where there are not priorities and quite happily taken criticism for it. But I am making priorities. These propositions take away from those priorities. It does not allow the department to have a run at what we want to do. And this Assembly voted almost unanimously for the Common Strategic Policy, where my priorities were laid out clearly in the first three priorities. So I will conclude, and then I must address some other issues, so perhaps it isn't my conclusion yet. I'm greatly concerned, sir, that the real and very practical, I said to conclude, sir, because it's a really good way to keep people's attention. I'll do it again in a minute. I'm greatly concerned that the real and very practical issue that this proposition creates are dismissed by the proposer. When he states, when the deputy states, the litany of minor obstacles is not insurmountable. Catchment issues, families with more than one child, changes to the policy for admissions, and translations of syllabus are not insuperable problems. With goodwill, that could easily be overcome. So schools need more than goodwill for significant change. If we adopt this attitude and dismiss the real, fluently expressed concerns of head teachers across our schools, we send not only the wrong message, but we demonstrate a disdain for a profession that is simply disappointing for us as an assembly. To accept this as a principle ignores the principled stance of head teachers. And so, okay. And the paragraph in the proposer's report is key. At the end of the day, however, it is not head teachers of primary schools who decide strategic issues for the island. It is the elected members of the Assembly. If the Assembly decides that English-French bilingual education is of public interest, it is for the Education Department to deliver. So I do not believe we can impose this change on schools given that they do not want it. The message from us is, you may be the professionals who commit your working lives to be running and responsible for educations of thousands of children. But we know best because it sounds like a good idea. I will say, before I read some of the comments from head teachers, that I will say that the door is not closed on bilingual schools. And on the radio the other morning I said this as well, so this is not just in this speech. So if members who want to support this, and the APF who seem to be driving this, want to go and work with schools, see the reality of schools, go into the classroom day to day and see what is happening, see how children are being taught, see the limitations, see the challenges, work with a school, come up with a plan, a business plan, a way of funding, a way of staffing, and the support of the school, and come back to me with that plan, then that bilingual school can be supported. But that's if parents want it, if the school wants it, and we can get it to work effectively. So that is where the energy for those who are talking about this should be directed. And I think that would be a much more constructive approach than simply saying we will impose something that is not wanted on schools. So during the consultation with head teachers, which I do believe is valid, the questions were direct, they were simple, and they were returns. And so there was a lot of return. There were a number of responses, but I will read just some of them so I think some of them were very strong. And I will make the point that I did email all head teachers to say, are you sure you want me to publish your comments? Are you absolutely sure? And the answer was yes. Those comments wanted to be seen from head teachers because they wanted to make it clear the impact of this change on their schools. So some examples, we believe we have more important priorities. To manage the curriculum expectation is already challenging without increasing the workload and capacity of teachers by introducing bilingual expectation. We are very happy with the current arrangement of the French experience. If this proceeds, where is the funding coming from? Where is the curriculum coming from? There are many greater pressing needs to be addressed in schools. It does feel ironic that we are even having this conversation, being in a school with a specialist French teacher, a school that often performs very strongly in the ISTED for French and other languages, and the school about to take Year 6 children on a residential visit to France. We cannot recruit and retain high quality teachers. It is enough to be French speakers. There will need to be quality practitioners too. It is not enough, sorry, to be French teachers. That's a really key point. They need to be quality practitioners too. One of the drives in our schools must be to have quality practitioners in every single post. The teaching of anything in our schools, from year reception to year 6 to year 12 to year 13 takes skill and it takes time to learn. It is a craft. So, another important question, does the head teacher, deputy head teacher also have to be bilingual, therefore limiting current talent and recruitment into the post? Resources are limited, so why would this suggestion be above other initiatives? For example, oracy development, and there's a fantastic oracy project going on in schools. I've had feedback from businesses who have had year 5s and 6s deliver stuff to them. Who've come to, when I was speaking to them at events, have said, unbelievable the work that's going on in some of your schools, which is excellent to hear. Oracy development or further language support for Polish or Portuguese students. Okay, so there was so much more that I could read, but I think the attention span has probably just about been lost by now. So I will finish. So perhaps deputies, as I say, go into schools if you want to support this. Go and see the reality of what they're doing. You are invited into schools at any time. You go and involve yourself in the ECOF programme. It's a great programme. You take an hour of your day each week. I've done it for the last 5 years. Go and read with children, particularly year 1s. It's really, really difficult in English alone, let alone in French. Go and involve yourself, sir, because that is how we understand schools. That is how we support schools. That is how we respect professionals. That is how we avoid the politics of nice ideas, and where there's a will, there's a way. So, sir, for the details for the reasons I've detailed today, the additional points from the comments paper and the report of head teachers survey, I must ask members to reject all parts of this amended proposition today. Sir. Thank you.